We'd do anything for kids, yet 1 in 6 children in the U.S. struggle with hunger. Help end childhood hunger near you. Learn how at feedingamerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to Tri-City Sports Now. You heard what I just said about Louisville is correct. And we started a little bit talking about in Marky's monologue, what with Steve Forbes' contract extension, there is not going to be any mid-major program, in my opinion. I don't see how they could, taking Forbes away from ETSU. Now, a major program, maybe, and let's face it, Louisville might be in the market for a coach after the dismissal of Rick Pitino and an interim coach handling them this year. Now, it would seem that if you're going to go on probation, you might not want to get a guy who used to be an assistant of Bruce Pearl and had to suffer through a one-year show cause coaching JUCO basketball to be your next coach. And also, Louisville may look down their nose, no matter if ETSU makes the NCAAs for 2 straight years, at an ETSU coach. Let's face it, Louisville is used to hiring Rick Pitino's. They're used to hiring Denny Crum's. They're not used to hiring, the guy from the Southern Conference. Southern Conference has produced some pretty good basketball coaches over the years. I mean, let's face facts. Lefty Driesell, Norm Sloan, Terry Holland, Bobby Crimmins, just to name a few off the top of my head. But nevertheless, there's been some, what can I tell you here? You can see where a Louisville might want to say, hey, we could maybe take a coach away from a major program, even if we do have probation, something like that. So that's something to consider as well. But as I said before, the NCAA ruling has come out, and essentially now Louisville is no longer your 2013 NCAA champion, if you can believe it, yes. They have had that title taken away from them. And of course, it is Louisville that began the first reports of the FBI investigation into college basketball came from the Louisville Cardinals program. Evidently, Adidas, through coaches, paying the players $100,000. And the idea is it's only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. But anyway, the NCAA upholds a ruling that the Louisville Cardinals must vacate their 2013 national championship. I still don't know about that. And to tell you the truth, I think that this shows the weakness of the NCAA. We all saw Louisville win the 2013 national championship. How do you now say, no, they didn't? How bad would the runner-up look if they tried to declare themselves the national champion? There's now no national champion in 2013, according to the NCAA. Really? Huh? What? No national champion? Really? How do you do this? Many times this doesn't even hold up. Originally, the NCAA, after the Jerry Sandusky scandal, took 111 victories away from Joe Paterno's college football record, thus making Bobby Bowden the all-time leader in Division I victories. A few years later, they reinstated the victories to Joe Paterno. I just don't, Reggie Bush taking away his Heisman, Louisville here, you want to penalize these people, penalize them. Give them the death penalty, suspend the program for a year. This sort of stuff, forget about it. How do you do, all that's going to happen now is in a record book, you put an asterisk. I think in the 70s, Oklahoma won a bowl game. They had to forfeit it afterwards, some sort of sanctions. You read down the list of Oklahoma, all that you have is, the record is there of the bowl game, there's just an asterisk. Are you really going to tell me Reggie Bush isn't a Heisman winner? Are you really going to tell me that Louisville isn't the 2013 champion, even if they cheated their way to get it. I know. There are lots of people that say, Hank Aaron is still the true home run champion with 755. Why? Barry Bonds, he used those PEDs. I don't recognize him. That's fine. I mean, to be brutally honest with you, who the greatest home run hitter is subjective. Is it Bonds? Is it McGuire? Is it Ruth? Is it Aaron? Is it someone else? But when you look at this, and it's a matter of opinion, but how do you take this stuff away and then have it recognized? I think in the case of Paterno, you were actually, one of the reasons why the victories were reinstated is because they said, you know what? Nobody's recognizing Bobby Bowden. Not even himself is recognizing him as college football's all-time winner. It just shows the weakness of the NCAA. And I almost think that the NCAA is being this weak to try to preserve their status and not have the major conferences break away, which, to be brutally honest with you, I would be tremendously in favor of. And also, as I mentioned at the start of the show, pointing out that I think it's much more likely on an annual basis for ETSU to win the Southern Conference Men's Basketball Championship than I do for the Tennessee football team to win the Southeastern Conference Football Championship. After all, since the last time the Vols won the SEC title, ETSU has won the SoCon, or their conference, I should say, because they were in the Atlantic Sun for a couple of years, actually about 10 years. They've won their conference a grand total of 5 times, perhaps going on 6, since Tennessee won their last conference football championship. Wouldn't it stand to reason then that in this day and age it's more likely for ETSU to win a Southern Conference men's basketball championship than UT to win a football title? Now, where I'm going with that is quite simple. When you look at what could make Tennessee football great again, reestablishing the dominance of the 90s, or for that matter, perhaps a previous era of long ago, I think when you look at it, Tennessee does not have the players in their backyards, a state of, that Florida did. I've reported until I'm blue in the face. There were 33 players in the NFL born in Tennessee, or from Tennessee, I should say, at the start of the season on an NFL rosters last year. There were 201 from the state of Florida. There were 29 players drafted by the NFL from the state of Georgia. In last year's NFL draft, that's almost how many players in the NFL are from Tennessee. How can the Vols then compete with the states that produce more players in the conference than the state of Tennessee does? Namely, not only Florida, not only Georgia, but South Carolina, Alabama, Louisiana, and certainly Texas. How do you compete? It's not easy. I've even mentioned how it's comparable for Missouri. The amount of players that are put in the NFL from Missouri is comparable to the amount of players from Tennessee. And the Missouri Tigers don't have any in-state FBS programs to compete with them for recruits. You can debate how many of Vanderbilt, MTSU, or Memphis are really going to pick off from the Vols, but there are going to be starting positions that they'll have that Tennessee on a year-to-year basis just won't. So they'll pick off a few. Again, these are the problems. So how does Tennessee become great again? And I've said this until I'm blue in the face. I think it stems from, yes, the major conferences have to break away from the NCAA, and then they would start paying the players. Because if Tennessee is the second most profitable college football program, and it is, according to records from last year, then there's your advantage. You can tell me all about history, but nobody goes to a football program for a national championship won before they were born. And that's how long it's been since Tennessee won the national title. Nobody goes to a college football program because of nosebleed seats. They could see where, Tennessee plays in a 100,000-seat stadium and Vanderbilt plays in a 40,000-seat stadium would be of attraction to a recruit. But really, Tennessee has 100,000 seats. Georgia only has 90,000. Really? That's not going to do it. Pageantry? Just about everyone plays pageantry. Everyone has traditions. So how do you do it? You take advantage of the profits that you're accruing and you use it to pay players. That's the way that Tennessee could be great again in football and in true national power. And until that happens, then it's always going to be more likely for ETSU to say win the men's basketball Southern Conference championship than it is Tennessee to win the SEC championship. Anyway, this goes and proves it, as I said. Oh, you're taking the national championship away from Louisville. Well, then who won it then? It's a weak penalty to an organization that refuses to basically cut its nose off to spite its face by reinstating a TV ban. I mean, how would you have a contract now? Wouldn't there be some sort of violation, network suing, let's say, if you said, Louisville, no, they can't be televised anymore, sorry. I mean, people with their iPhone putting a game up on Facebook Live in the stadium, in Freedom Hall in Louisville. So that just doesn't work anymore. Number 2. Death penalty. Nobody does that. They haven't done it since SMU in 87. Oh, we don't want to do that. That would just cripple everybody. Yeah, but maybe that would stop what's going on in the NCAAs. NCAA is too fearful to do that. They give death penalty to somebody, so they give it to Penn State with the Sandusky scandal. Or let's say they give it to Michigan State with their scandal, with Nassar. It's a theory. Can you then see those schools petitioning the powerful Big Ten and saying, that's it, it's time, let's get away. You know what, we're playing 20 games in our conference anyway. We can find other teams to play in the Big Five. Let's break away. It's time. Let's do it a different way. I can see it very easily. A little bit scummy, but yeah, the NCAA, they're basically, I think, trying to survive, and by that reason, they are not penalizing the way they should. Speaking of the Vols, I've got some Tennessee football news that I want to share with you. I do have really a look to what they're going to do, their scholarship situation in 2018. Patrick Brown writing this, and it's quite interesting because they've got several scholarships they can offer, and I've got a thought on that. And also John Adams writing, will the Vols miss Quentin Dormandy? And I think that they just might. Former starting quarterback for Tennessee, because I didn't see a whole lot out of Jarrett Guarantano or Will McBride last year. And I don't know if the Vols really did, because a lot of people are talking about J.T. Shrout starting as a true freshman. We'll just have to wait and see. Anyway, we'll talk a little bit about that in our next segment. Before I get to that, though, looking at some change-ups here, I want to thank Jerry Bonkowski for coming on and talking NASCAR. One last note here about NASCAR is a story that came out. Matt Bonesteel, Washington Post, came out yesterday. The Daytona 500 overnight TV ratings are likely the worst in the race's history. And I thought it was a tremendous race, and that's a little distressing, but I almost think that it shows the way that media coverage is these days. There is a tendency to kind of look down their nose at NASCAR and certainly pro football these days. The NBA, not so much. And I think that it's sort of the cultural alignment that those various sports put them with, and it becomes very sports writer friendly. Case in point, when I mentioned that the NBC Sports Radio the NBC Sports Radio, not NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities, but the NBC Sports Radio update last Monday spoke of, well, it looks like Adam Silver is going to give the fans what they want. Next year, they're going to televise the schoolyard draft for the NBA All-Star Game. Another sport, it's not covered that way. It's covered, took them long enough. Finally, this sport is televising the schoolyard draft. Shows you a little media bias, what's a little bit more supportive, etc., etc. And I think NASCAR, basically by being a traditionally Southern Heartland sport, has had long time certain sportscasters, certain sports media, national sports media, look down their nose at it. We can discuss some things here, but I'll give you this. They talk about the Daytona 500. Last year's Daytona 500 scored a 6.5 overnight rating and a 6.6 final, which tied the 2016 edition as the second least watched Daytona 500 of all time. 2014, the race was delayed 6.5 hours by rain, and it went up against the Olympic closing ceremonies, so that was something. Anyway, Sunday Daytona 500 drew a 5.1 overnight rating on Fox, according to Sports Business Daily's Austin Karp. Possibly a record low. You want to know what also drew a 5.1 rating? The NBA All-Star Game. But you don't see low rating for the NBA All-Star Game. What you hear, and I'm showing now on our Facebook 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities Facebook page, the Washington Post article. To me, this is something of a double standard. I understand it's news. Hey, lowest Daytona 500 rating. But how much criticism do you have for that? After a race in which, as I said, a new star in Bubba Wallace probably emerged. You had an exciting finish. You had the crashes that a lot of casual racing fans, hey, that's what they come to watch. Let's face it, a lot of diehards watch it as well. I understand there's criticism of it. You know, we've heard it all before. All you do in watching NASCAR is wait for the crashes. We've all heard that. Okay, well, there were a lot of crashes at this last Daytona 500, and there was a lot of drama because of that. Some talk that the three-tiered race segment, that's not catching on, etc., and maybe that's right. I've always thought that NASCAR should have a separate award for the driver that wins the most races and look at that as a type of championship. And I've always thought that that would serve it very well, possibly even more than the playoff. But, you know, so much criticism in NASCAR. You can have the same exact rating in the NBA All-Star Game, though, and no criticism. And, folks, let me ask you something. Who got it right? NBA by having Fergie or NASCAR for having Charlize Theron?